many times before, listeners, many probably actually quoted on every single episode, because from my understanding, my awareness, more importantly, absolutely believe it to be true. And that's that we're not here to fix anyone. We're not here to fix ourselves. We don't need fixing. We're not robots. We're not machines. You know, we're humans, and with the human experience goes lessons of learning. And the more we learn, the more we grow. And the more we grow, the brighter we shine. And it brings in that quote, and no apologies, listeners, for repeating this yet again, from the American Anne Lamott, when she says, and I'm paraphrasing now, ships don't go chasing over seas and oceans looking for boats to sail. Sorry, I've got that completely wrong. Lighthouses don't go chasing over seas and oceans looking for boats and ships to sail. They just stand there and shine.
Absolutely.
Isn't that true?
Absolutely. Paul, you know, today as we speak, there's a little bit of war going on in Europe, and I wanted to bring that into the conversation for a brief moment, because I've been places where, you know, most people don't dare to go. There's war, but right now with what's happening in Ukraine, I think we can see a clear example of a soulful leadership. As you know, Vladimir Zelensky was offered even asylum in the United States, and he refused, and he decided to stay. And now leadership is not really leading people and armies into battlefield. Today leadership is just setting an example, but I think he set a clear example of what a soulful leadership is and what it means to its people.
There's a growing feeling, Arif, isn't there, that old model of settling conflict, that, you know, I will win, I will be first, I will enforce my rule upon you, my thoughts, my opinions. That's, you know, there's an energy change in the world, isn't there? There's a shift that's saying that's old hat, because the heart's being allowed to breathe and speak more. And I'm going to bring in something which I feel is quite, on the surface of it, quite a contentious statement. And certainly the more masculine energies might rebel against this. And I've heard this said quite a lot, with that soulful leadership from the more feminine energy of love and compassion and caring. That's the way forward. Any thoughts around that, Arif?
That's wonderful, absolutely. And I had examples in mind to share with you of really soulful leadership with the feminine energy. You know, soulful leaders are somehow unrealistic in my mind. They break the mold. They are more of visionaries, just like you know, I've studied a lot of successful people. A black little girl that grew up in poverty to become the first billionaire in the world, of a soulful leadership in Oprah Winfrey. Another example in that I can relate to is unrealistic. Again, a little sex slave from Yazidi Kurdish background called Nadia Murad, who was you know, stolen by ISIS. This phenomena that was shaking the foundation of civilization a few years back, who went on in 2018 to even win the Nobel Peace Prize. That's what Nadia Murad did. These are examples of really feminine, soulful leadership that I thought about would be relevant here.
Yeah, there is this. So, I don't know. I mean, what stops us living this new way, Arif? You know, this, if it is that simple, what we're speaking about, and in my heart, I really, truly do believe it is that simple. So how do we then, as individuals, you know, you and I are just two, but how do we as two become 4, become 8, 16, and how do we filter that out through the world, so that this new way of being, this new, more compassionate, love-filled, heart-centered way of being conquers, and I'm even mindful of that word, conquers, but that old paradigm of fear and anger and war and control. How do we overcome that, Arif?
Paul, I've been lucky to have very powerful feminine leadership role models in my life, and the book that we're working on, the Ministry of Miracles. The first miracle, really built miracle creator in my life has been a mother figure, somebody who I really looked up. She's now in her late 80th, 80th year, 88th birthday, and I have just used her as an example with other women in my life that how to bring love and passion and always being caring, about the other person, even about the people in our community as I grew up. And that's an example I used to really to showcase a soulful leadership through this feminine energy. And for you and I as male figures, all we could do is really set an example for others. And that's what I'm looking forward to with the World Game Changers organization, just to have a powerful story to share with other people who like to be more loving and caring. And under pressure most people buckle and they would lose control, but all we can do is really stay calm and loving and caring throughout all the trials and turbulations of life, and know that everything is possible through love and care. Paul?
It is indeed. And is it simply, Arif, is it simply just a case of, okay, well, we need to embrace more feminine energy? Or is there a balance to be had? Is it kind of like, almost like the proverbial yin and yang, where we need that balance, that dance, as I call it, between the masculine and the feminine?
I believe there's a balance to be kept here, and again, the studying figures throughout history, a clear example of really a loving, caring, powerful male figure would be an example of Jesus Christ, who so many people love and believe in. There's a story that when Jesus was going around and gathering his 12 disciples, he would just look inside somebody's eyes and just figure out their energy. And he would say that, "You follow me." Very short speech in gathering his 12 disciples to changing the world the way that he did. But I think that's the purest example of male and let's say, soulful leadership. And we always do need a balance, as the world just dances around in a way of balance as we go forward, Paul.
Absolutely. So from a personal point of view, Arif, and around your own world, your own vision, your own values, not always, but I often ask this question of people that, okay, so imagine that, in times to come, be that 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, whatever the time is, but as you take those last few breaths and you look back on a life of, whatever that life was, and that's different for all of us, but, in that 30 seconds, as you're taking those proverbial last breaths from leaving this physical body, what would that all mean? What does that all look like to you, Arif? What's your vision for the world? What does that feel like? What does that look like?
That's a wonderful question, Paul. And my whole life is being about really making an positive impact in the lives of other people, as I went through so many challenges, starting with war and injuries that threatened my life. But as I look back again, in recent, just last year, as you know, I had a chance to be care of to my father, who was in his 85th birthday, who passed away. That was a very humbling experience, to have somebody you love so much to pass away in your arm. And this is what happened to me, and it just gave me a perspective of putting myself in his shoes. If it was me really living this worldly life, and what would I have done, what would I have accomplished, which is one of the aspirations that I shared with you about reverse engineering life for the the people who read the books, the people who are within the organization, to take them back to that moment that I really experienced. If it was me, I wanted to be satisfied that I have made a positive impact in the lives of as many people around the world as possible. And right now, there's close to 8 billion people in the world, and this kind of information, this kind of love and care and looking back at your life from at the end is more needed to be focused on than just the hustle of the day and how am I gonna, fix all of my problems of today, versus putting yourself in that position to look back from the end, or reverse engineer your thinking to say that what impact will I make when I am on my last breath. So for me personally, I want to make a positive impact in the lives of as many people as possible as I take my last breath. That would be a smile on my face leaving this planet.
Thank you for that share, Arif. And I just want to go back, if I may, when you alluded to the passing of your father. And yet again, it's a question I ask of people. On that very poignant occasion, did you celebrate his life or did you mourn his passing? Or was it a mixture of both?
Absolutely. That, again, it's a very emotional moment. And as I shared with you, I have 7 sisters and extended family. So there was a lot of what can I tell you? How can I put it? A lot of eagerness to cry and to mourn and to, the loss of our father. And I, being myself, seeing from my Canadian perspective, I said, this is a moment to celebrate his life. He wrote books and he dedicated his life to basic freedoms of the people in the society that he lived in. It was a big accomplishment, and thousands of people, 15,000 people showed up to his probably funeral and to his burial, and it was such an overwhelming experience. And I said, wow, if I just could get a chance to fulfill, a little bit of his shoes. And it was a celebration. Going back to your question, it was a mixture of all these emotions, but in my mind, it was a celebration of his life and the way that he lived his life. And as a child, I remember he never had breakfast alone, and we would sit down to eat breakfast. He would wait for 1 or 2 people from the small village community that we were in to come and to show up before he even had breakfast. So it was a kind of caring personality for other people that made his life more fruitful, which we celebrated in my mind, even though there was mourning going on. So there's a balance of really letting go and being in the moment of celebration, which we had.
Interesting, that word balance comes into play again, listeners. It's never far away from our lips, is it? The balance of life. For every day, there is a night.
Absolutely.
Things like that. And just listening to Arif talk there, yet again, that reinforcement of that balance. Looking back, Arif, we often speak about visions and values and that kind of stuff. Looking back on your late father's life and the legacy he left behind, what would you say was his greatest value that he instilled in you?
Paul, that's a very deep question. I think staying humble was his. This was the value that I got from all of the people who came, and I was very blessed to be there in that moment. But he always treated everybody with respect, whether it was the CEO or the president of a country, or it was a garbage man from the street. Everybody with respect. This humility about being a caring person is really what I think the value that I have, that he instilled in me, to value every human being and respect. Like a famous person, I can't remember the name, but I think it was Muhammad Ali, that I can't respect the person who treats me well but mistreats the waiter that is waiting us. So that's the value that I really appreciated, that he treated everybody and set an example for myself on how to treat people with respect, no matter what their position may be.
Because isn't it interesting, listeners, this word values, and obviously on various podcast episodes you hear me enter this word consistently. And, you know, there was a time in my life, in my earlier life, where I just thought it was something that'd be nice to have. It'd be great to have this values thing I hear people talking about. And I never really understood, Arif, the power of really holding dear values. Not values that were convenient, that you could pick them up, put them down, but things that you could actually, they were like pillars in your life. They were stable, stepping, you know, reference points of these will guide me and keep me on the straight and narrow within reason. And, you know, in my humble opinion, there's not enough power, focus, energy, attention, call it what you will, given to the importance of values. Any thoughts around that, Arif?
Power, I had a quote coming to mind, Paul, about really creating power in the now, and we all have this, and this is from John Maxwell, who said, when there's hope in the future, there's power in the now. Power that we bring to now is really to giving value and respecting other people and their opinion and staying humble, and in my opinion, hearing the other person out before speaking or before you know, expressing our own opinions. This is another thing that I learned in life, is always to listen. Everybody's got a story. We can't judge people based on their current situation. We just have to let them be themselves. Everybody's going through so many challenges today around the world, and hearing people out is I think one of the greatest values that we can bring to people, Paul.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Arif, I want to ask you one big question as we draw towards a close. But before I do that, I'd invite you in to share your contact details with our listeners for the show notes. So what is the best way that people can find out more about you, the amazing work, and I will say, listeners, the amazing work that Arif does. I would strongly encourage you to check this beautiful soul out. But how do we find you, Arif?
Thank you very much, Paul, for the opportunity. And again, the website, our website is going to be up by end of the month, and that is www.arifgilany.com. That's ARIFGILANY.com. And I look forward to the future with brighter hopes as we share some valuable information with people who are willing to make a change in their lives, Paul.
Thank you. So the big question then, just as we finally draw towards a close, Arif, on this Soulful Leaders podcast episode, you know, two simple words: soulful leaders. So, you started the episode by sharing your definition, your insight of what that is. If somebody comes to you, Arif, and says, Arif, I've listened to your episode, it was great, Soulful Leaders, I found it fascinating, but I don't know where to start. Give me some advice, give me some guidance, please. What would you say to them, Arif?
I would say, Paul, leadership starts with self. I mean, all the things that the pillars that we share with people, as you have shared with me many times, start with ourselves. We're all the leaders of our lives. We're all the leaders of our families before we can be the leaders of anybody. So setting an example personally to taking care of our health, to taking care of our businesses, our finances, that's really where we start. Leadership starts from inside. It starts with the person before we can lead anybody. Again, it's not about leading armies into battle, but it's about changing ourselves from within, having more awareness, tapping into our consciousness, and then connecting with the right-minded people. Really, people around us are so very important. That's why I'm excited to have this connection with you, Paul, and I'm looking forward to changing me first before we can impact other people.
Great advice. Great advice. So, listeners, there we have it. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I always enjoy talking to Arif. As I said, he's a beautiful soul. And so, I'm going to use a word that, yet again, in my humble opinion, and I hope it doesn't come across as being judgmental, when I say there is a word that's thrown around like confetti these days, and that word is authentic. From my experience of having the pleasure of many conversations with Arif, this beautiful soul is authentic. And on that positive note, to use an Arifism, I'm going to close by saying this. Remember, the world's changing. How will you respond?
Absolutely. The world is changing, Paul, and there's a quote that I heard that tough times.
Stopped.
Sorry, Arif. I did when I asked that question. When I sign off, that's always the sign.